Cinnamon is one of the most ancient spices on Earth. It has been traded, treasured, and used by human civilizations for more than 4,000 years. Appearing in ancient Egyptian records, referenced in Chinese botanical manuscripts dating back to 2700 BC, and mentioned throughout the Bible as a prized and precious commodity. For most of that history, its value is tied almost entirely to its extraordinary flavor and fragrance in the kitchen. That warm, sweet, complex aroma that has made it one of the most beloved spices in cuisines from Morocco to Mexico to India to Scandinavia. But in recent decades, something remarkable has been happening in gardens, on homesteads, and in the research laboratories of botanists and horticulturalists around the world. People have been rediscovering something that traditional cultures quietly knew for centuries. Cinnamon is not just good for your food, it is extraordinarily good for your plants. Every spring, as soon as the soil starts to warm and the first seedlings begin pushing through in my garden, out comes the cinnamon. Not a pinch, not a tentative sprinkle, a generous, intentional, deliberate application across seedling trays, soil surfaces, cut stems, rooting cuttings, and problem areas throughout the entire garden. It has become as fundamental to my spring gardening routine as turning the compost or sharpening the pruning shears. And once you understand why, once you see what this humble brown powder actually does at the biological and chemical level inside your garden, you will never start another spring without it either. Let us start with what cinnamon actually is, because understanding the substance helps explain why it works so powerfully in the garden. True cinnamon, Cinnamomum verum, also called Ceylon cinnamon, comes from the inner bark of a tree native to Sri Lanka. What most people in North America buy at the grocery store is actually cassia, a closely related species from China and Vietnam with a stronger, slightly more pungent flavor profile. Both contain cinnamaldehyde, the active compound responsible for that characteristic aroma and flavor, and both carry meaningful concentrations of eugenol, a naturally occurring phenylpropanoid with powerful antimicrobial and antifungal properties. It is these compounds, cinnamaldehyde and eugenol, working together that make cinnamon such a remarkable tool in the garden. The first and perhaps most significant benefit of cinnamon in the garden is its extraordinary ability to suppress fungal disease. Fungal problems are among the most frustrating and destructive challenges any gardener faces, and they are particularly devastating in the spring, when cool, moist soil and fluctuating temperatures create ideal conditions for fungal pathogens to thrive. Damping off is the one that kills more seedlings than almost any other cause. It is a fungal condition caused by several soil-borne pathogens, including Pythium, Rhizoctonia, and Fusarium, that attack seedlings at the soil line, causing them to suddenly collapse and die, just when they seem to be establishing beautifully. One day, your seedlings are upright and healthy. The next morning, they are lying flat on the soil surface, their stems pinched and rotted at the base, beyond saving. Cinnamon stops damping off in its tracks. The cinnamaldehyde and eugenol in ground cinnamon are directly toxic to the fungal pathogens responsible for this condition. A light dusting of ground cinnamon across the surface of your seedling trays and seed starting mix creates a protective barrier that these pathogens cannot penetrate. It does not harm the seeds. It does not harm the emerging seedlings. It does not alter the chemistry of your soil in any negative way. It simply sits at the soil surface and does what it has done for millions of years in the natural world. It inhibits microbial activity in its immediate environment with a quiet, steady biochemical authority that no synthetic fungicide can fully replicate, because no synthetic fungicide works as gently and as broadly at the same time. If you have ever lost a tray of seedlings to damping off, and most gardeners have, often more than once, the simple act of dusting your seed starting mix with ground cinnamon before sowing can be genuinely transformative. Gardeners who have made this switch consistently report dramatically lower seedling losses, fuller, healthier trays, and a confidence in their seed starting that they never had before. It costs almost nothing. It takes 30 seconds. And it works. Beyond damping off, cinnamon's antifungal properties extend to a wide range of other fungal problems that plague gardens throughout the growing season. Powdery mildew, that familiar white dusty coating that appears on the leaves of squash, cucumbers, roses, and zinnias during warm, humid weather, is a fungal disease that cinnamon can help suppress when applied as a preventive measure. A cinnamon tea, made by steeping several sticks in hot water, allowing it to cool completely, and then spraying it on the foliage of susceptible plants, creates a surface environment that is inhospitable to powdery mildew spores. It will not cure an advanced infection. As a preventive spray applied every week or two during the season, it meaningfully reduces the incidence and severity of the problem. Root rot, one of the most common killers of container plants and overwatered garden plants, is also fungal in origin. Mixing a small amount of ground cinnamon into the potting mix of new container plantings, or dusting it on the root ball of a plant you are repotting, introduces that antifungal activity directly into the root zone where it is needed most. Many experienced container gardeners have made this a standard practice, reporting noticeably healthier root systems and far fewer losses to the mysterious sudden decline that is almost always root rot in disguise. The second major benefit of cinnamon in the garden is something that surprises almost everyone who hears it for the first time. Cinnamon is a rooting agent, not a weak or theoretical one. It is a genuinely effective one that competes meaningfully with commercial rooting hormone powders that contain synthetic auxins. The reason comes down to indole 3-butyric acid, a naturally occurring plant hormone present in cinnamon that belongs to the auxin family, the same family of hormones that regulate root initiation in plants. When you dip a cutting into ground cinnamon before planting it, you are introducing a natural source of rooting hormone directly to the cut surface, stimulating the cells at the base of the cutting to begin the process of root formation while simultaneously protecting that vulnerable cut surface from fungal infection. This dual action, rooting stimulation plus antifungal protection, is something that commercial rooting hormone powders provide only half of. They stimulate rooting, but offer no protection against the fungal pathogens that commonly attack cuttings at the cut surface while they are in the vulnerable pre-rooting stage. Cinnamon does both simultaneously. Dip your cutting, tap off the excess, plant it in clean, well-draining propagation mix, and the cinnamon goes to work on both fronts immediately. Experienced propagators who have switched to cinnamon from synthetic rooting hormones often find their success rates improve rather than decline, particularly with soft-stemmed cuttings from herbs, perennials, and houseplants. For woody cuttings from shrubs and trees, combining a small amount of cinnamon with a touch of honey, which contains its own naturally occurring auxins and antibacterial compounds, creates a rooting paste that many experienced propagators consider superior to anything available commercially. Apply it to the cut end, allow it to dry briefly, and plant. The combination of rooting stimulation, antifungal protection, and antibacterial activity from the honey creates an environment at the cut surface that is as close to ideal for root initiation as you can achieve without a laboratory. The third benefit that brings me back to cinnamon every single spring is its remarkable effect on seedling vigor and early root development. Beyond simply preventing damping off, cinnamon applied to the soil around young seedlings appears to actively stimulate stronger, faster root growth in the early stages of plant development. The mechanism is not fully understood at the biochemical level, but the observational evidence from gardeners and from a growing body of horticultural research points consistently in the same direction. Seedlings grown in cinnamon-treated soil develop root systems that are noticeably denser and more extensive than those grown in untreated soil under the same conditions. Stronger roots in the early stages of development mean stronger plants throughout the entire growing season. A plant with a deep, well-branched root system established in its first weeks of life is better positioned to handle drought stress, nutrient uptake challenges, transplant shock, and pest pressure than a plant that spent those critical early weeks struggling with fungal interference or inadequate rooting hormone signals. The investment of a pinch of cinnamon at the seedling stage pays dividends all the way to harvest, and that compounding return on a nearly zero investment is one of the most compelling things about incorporating cinnamon into your spring garden routine. We are only halfway through what cinnamon can do in your garden. In Part 2, we are going to cover its remarkable effects on pest control, its ability to heal plant wounds, its role in protecting your soil ecosystem, and the specific application methods that will get you the best results from every use. If you have ever wanted a single simple tool that works across almost every challenge your garden faces in spring and beyond, keep reading. Cinnamon is about to become your most valuable gardening ally. Drop a comment below right now and tell us, have you ever used cinnamon in your garden before? We want to hear your experience before we get into Part 2. There is a moment every spring when the garden starts to feel like it is under siege. The aphids arrive on the rosebuds. The ants build highways through the vegetable beds, farming those aphids like livestock and protecting them from every predator that might otherwise keep them in check. The fungus gnats hover over the seedling trays. The mosquitoes begin breeding in every puddle and saucer of standing water within reach, and the average gardener reaches for a shelf full of different sprays, granules, and chemical treatments, one for each problem, each with its own set of warnings, precautions, and environmental concerns. Cinnamon handles most of these problems with a single ingredient, and it does it without harming beneficial insects beyond the target area, without leaving chemical residues on edible plants, and without introducing anything into your garden ecosystem that was not already present in nature in enormous quantities. That combination of broad effectiveness and complete safety is something the synthetic pesticide industry has never been able to match, and it is one of the most compelling reasons to make cinnamon a permanent fixture in your spring garden toolkit. Ants are one of the most persistent and damaging indirect pest problems in the garden. They do not eat plants directly in most cases, but their relationship with aphids makes them one of the gardener's most consequential enemies. Ants actively herd aphids, move them to new plant growth, protect them from ladybugs and other natural predators, and even overwinter aphid eggs in their underground colonies to ensure a fresh supply in spring. Breaking the ant-aphid relationship is one of the most effective things you can do for overall garden health, and cinnamon is one of the most reliable tools for doing it. Ants navigate by scent trails. They lay down chemical pathways that guide other workers from the colony to food sources and back, and those trails are everything to them. Cinnamon's powerful aromatic compounds, particularly cinnamaldehyde, disrupt and mask these scent trails so effectively that ants simply cannot navigate through or around a cinnamon barrier. Sprinkle a generous line of ground cinnamon around the base of plants being attacked by aphids, across ant entry points into raised beds, and around the perimeter of seedling areas. Reapply every 2 weeks and after heavy rain. The consistency of application is what makes it work. A single application will slow them down. A maintained barrier will redirect the colony entirely. Fungus gnats are the bane of indoor seedling growing and greenhouse propagation. The adult gnats are largely harmless but deeply annoying. The larvae, however, live in the top layer of moist potting soil and feed on fine root hairs, damaging seedlings at their most vulnerable stage and introducing fungal pathogens through the feeding wounds they create. A dusting of ground cinnamon across the surface of seedling trays and potting mix creates an environment that fungus gnat larvae cannot tolerate. The antifungal and antimicrobial properties of the cinnamon eliminate the decaying organic matter the larvae feed on, and the compounds in the cinnamon itself act as a direct deterrent. Reapply after watering as needed. It is one of the simplest and most effective fungus gnat solutions available. Mosquitoes present a different kind of challenge in the garden. Standing water in saucers under containers, low spots in the garden, bird baths, and drainage areas all become breeding sites almost overnight in warm weather. Cinnamon oil added to standing water kills mosquito larvae with remarkable efficiency. Research published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry demonstrated that cinnamon oil was highly effective at eliminating Aedes aegypti mosquito larvae, the species responsible for transmitting dengue, Zika, and yellow fever at very low concentrations. A few drops of cinnamon oil in standing water that cannot be drained eliminates the larval population without harming birds, beneficial insects, or plants. For areas around the garden where adult mosquitoes tend to rest, a dusting of ground cinnamon on the soil surface and mulch acts as a deterrent that keeps them moving elsewhere. One of the most underappreciated uses of cinnamon in the garden is wound treatment. Every time you prune a stem, divide a perennial, take a cutting, or accidentally break a branch, you create an open wound on the plant, an entry point for the bacterial and fungal pathogens that cause stem rot, canker, and disease. Professional horticulturalists use wound sealants and pruning compounds for this purpose, but ground cinnamon applied directly to a fresh cut works on the same principle with entirely natural chemistry. Dust it generously onto the cut surface immediately after pruning. The antimicrobial and antifungal compounds in the cinnamon seal the wound biologically, suppressing pathogen entry while the plant begins its own healing process. This is particularly valuable on woody plants, roses, fruit trees, and any succulent or cactus that has suffered damage. The best thing about all of these applications, the seedling treatment, the pest barriers, the larval control, and the wound healing, is that they work together as part of a single coherent approach to garden health, rather than a collection of isolated fixes. Cinnamon does not solve one problem in your garden. It raises the baseline health and resilience of your entire growing space by addressing fungal pressure, pest pressure, and plant vulnerability, simultaneously with one simple, natural, endlessly available ingredient. Sprinkle it on your seedling trays every spring. Dust it around your most vulnerable plants. Add it to your potting mix. Treat your pruning cuts with it. Keep a jar of it in your garden shed right next to your trowel and your gloves, because that is exactly where it belongs. Try it this spring and tell us in the comments what you notice. We genuinely want to hear how it works in your garden, in your climate, with your plants. Every garden is different, and every experience shared here helps someone else grow something better. If this gave you a new way to think about one of the oldest spices on Earth, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and come back every week for more natural gardening ideas that actually work. We will see you in the next one.